choices. We make them every day. Some are obvious, some are a little harder, but here's what we don't do. We usually don't willingly choose something that we know is going to be bad for us or hurt us or cause us pain. Example, well, there's a food that you know that you're highly allergic to, and if you eat it, it's going to get you really, really sick. You don't willingly make the choice to eat it anyway, do you? Or there's an investment you're considering, and you absolutely know it's going to lose money. You know it, your financial advisors are advising you against it. The company you know is actually in the process of going out of business. You don't still invest in that company anyway, do you? Or how about this? You see a cop with a radar gun and you're already going a little over the speed limit. Well, you don't hit the accelerator and go even faster, do you? Some things, if you see them coming, you make sure that you avoid. But this particular week in the life of Jesus, as he moves from the upper room and into the Garden of Gethsemane, we see Jesus doing the exact opposite of that. We see Jesus willingly making a choice that he knows is not going to end well for him, at least not in the short term. See, Jesus knows that if he goes to the Garden of Gethsemane, that Judas will show up too. Not as a friend, but as a betrayer, coming with the temple guards to arrest Jesus and put him on trial. And Jesus knows that those rigged trials will end in his conviction, and that conviction will put him on a cross, and that on the cross he will die an extremely painful death. And still, knowing all that, Jesus makes the choice to go to the Garden of Gethsemane, when he just as easily could have stayed in hiding or even slipped out of Jerusalem in the middle of the night. So why does he do that? Well, once again, he does that because Jesus thinks of us even before he thinks of himself, and because Jesus loves us more than his own life. And because Jesus knows that he is our only hope and that he's our only option, that because we cannot save ourselves, we need him to go to the cross as our substitute if our sins are to be forgiven and we're to have a chance at life with God in heaven. And that's all beginning to come to a climax right now, beginning in the Garden of Gethsemane. So let's look in on that event and see what Luke wrote about it. Luke chapter 22. Listen.
Jesus went out as usual to the Mount of Olives, and his disciples followed him. On reaching the place, he said to them, "Pray that you will not fall into temptation." He withdrew about a stone's throw beyond them, knelt down, and prayed, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." An angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. And being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. When he rose from prayer, he went back to the disciples. He found them asleep, exhausted from sorrow. "Why are you sleeping?" he asked them. "Get up and pray so that you will not fall into temptation."
So one of the things that strikes me as I hear that account is this line that Luke wrote, verse 41. He withdrew about a stone's throw beyond them, knelt down, and prayed. And I'm wondering, why? Why did Jesus do that? I mean, the disciples are still around. Peter, James, and John are maybe 20, 30 yards away. The other disciples a little farther away, but still in the vicinity. And so why does Jesus put some physical distance between himself and everybody else? Why, when he knows what's coming and he could use the support of his friends, does Jesus make this choice to go off by himself, alone? I mean, you ever been in that sort of a spot yourself? Alone, isolated, feeling lonely even in a crowd, even when there's people around? Ever found yourself praying and wondering if God's hearing that anguished cry? Wrestling intensely with God in a crisis? Maybe it's outside in a hospital waiting room. Maybe it's a restless, sleepless hours in the middle of the night when you just can't shut your mind off because of some deep inner turmoil. If you've ever been in those sort of anguished alone times, you wouldn't really wish that sort of loneliness on anyone else, would you? But here Jesus deliberately chooses that. Jesus goes off and he prays alone. And again, I'm wondering, why? Why did Jesus choose to be alone when there were other people around that he could have leaned on, that could have given him support in this time? Well, I don't think it's privacy here, like he needed this moment where nobody could overhear anything. I think it's because that aloneness was also part of the cross that he had to bear. You see, Jesus didn't just carry the burden of our sin to the cross. Jesus, as he goes to the cross, also carries the burdens of sin's consequences and the things that make the world a very broken place, like that aloneness, which lets me know once again that Jesus is thinking about us before he's thinking about himself. So Jesus made this choice to be alone here in the garden as he's talking to the Father and the heavy things he's facing, so that we'd know that he knows how we feel. That he knows how we feel when all those stresses and struggles that we feel that we're all alone in this mess out there. And not only that he knows how we feel in this, I also think Jesus made that choice so that we'd know that even when we feel alone, that we're not alone. That he is there with us, carrying that burden with us and for us. And then, if you follow along, Jesus also tells us what to do in the struggle so that that struggle doesn't get the best of us. Did you catch what Jesus said to his disciples both before he went off to pray alone and then after? Verse 40, on reaching the place he said to them, "Pray that you will not fall into temptation." And then when he comes back, verse 46, he says, "Get up and pray, so you will not fall into temptation." Pray, so you will not fall into temptation. Kind of sounds to me like Jesus is telling them when they're alone and afraid to lean into something that he's already taught them. You might remember that Jesus' disciples some time back had asked him, "Lord, teach us to pray." And in response, Jesus taught them what we've come to know as the Lord's Prayer. And that one of the phrases in the Lord's Prayer is, "Lead us not into temptation." Now, that sounds a lot like what Jesus is telling his disciples here, doesn't it? Pray that you don't fall into temptation. So what he's saying is, when you're stressed or struggling or wrestling with this hard stuff, don't go it alone. Don't go it alone. You don't have to. Pray. Talk to God. Ask God to help you. It's like he's telling his disciples, guys, you will be tempted and challenged in the hours ahead. You're going to be under a lot of stress and strain. Your faith's going to be stretched. It might even seem like your world is falling apart. And some of the things you'll end up doing are going to leave you with a load of guilt. So pray. Pray that you're not destroyed by all that. Pray that your faith, while it might fail, doesn't completely falter. Pray that if you stumble, you're going to find your way through the temptation and back to God, and that God will help you get back up on your feet again. Now, as you're thinking about what Jesus said to the disciples there, I'm guessing you might be realizing like I am, that Jesus is also talking to you, because there are things, some of them hard things, that we're tempted with all the time. And if we try to get through that stuff on our own, more likely than not, we'll stumble, or like the disciples, fall asleep on the job. Jesus wants you to know that you have help with that. You have help with that, and you don't need to go it alone, because you are not alone. The Father's here to help. You don't just have willpower, you've got God's power to rely on. So don't settle for willpower to defeat the stuff you're struggling with. Use God's power. Pray to the Lord and ask for His help in overcoming the temptation. Now, what's that for you? What's that for you right now? I mean, it's different for each of us. Each of us struggles with something different, but each of us struggles with something. So before moving on this conversation, take a moment to do what Jesus told you to do here. Hit pause and think about what you're struggling with right now, one of those temptations. Think about what you're struggling with, and then, before you hit play again, talk to God about that. Pray that you might not fall into temptation. Jesus hears that prayer of ours, and Jesus is there to help. You don't have to deal with that hard stuff all by yourself. And you don't have to deal with the struggle of temptation all by yourself either. You are not alone. You don't just have willpower to deal with the temptation. You have God's power to deal with stuff. See, willpower at times can be weak. But God's power is always strong. It's stronger than anything else around. Which is why, as we're struggling with stuff, Jesus urges us to pray. But that's not all that Jesus does here. Because as Jesus goes off to say his own prayers, talking to the Father about the hard stuff that he's looking at facing in the hours ahead, Jesus also shows us how to pray too, and how to talk to God in our dark and difficult times of stress and strain and struggle and suffering. And not only what to do and how to, but also how to make it through if God says no and doesn't answer your prayer the way that you want him to. Now, every person prays to avoid suffering. It's not sinful to do that. In fact, not only is it natural, God asks you to do that. There's a lot of Bible on that. Here's a few. Psalm 50, verse 15. Call upon me in times of trouble. 1 Peter 5, verse 7. Turn all your anxiety over to God because he cares for you. So God says, pray to me, talk to me about these things. But here's the deal. The answer that you want might sometimes end up being different than the answer that you get. See, God might remove the suffering in answer to your prayer. Or God, in answer to your prayer, might lessen the suffering. But it's also possible that in answer to your prayer, God might, instead of removing the suffering, give you what you need to make it through the suffering. All of those are possible responses to your prayer. So as we look at Jesus praying in the garden here, what can we learn from him about making it through our own dark night of the soul times? Especially those times when it seems like we're praying and praying and praying and not getting the answer that we want. Well, how do you make it through that? Well, we've already talked about the first thing. Pray. Talk to God about what's going on. Let him hear what I'll call the cries of your heart, even the anguish of your heart. Jesus certainly did. I mean, Luke talks about Jesus sweating drops of blood, which certainly sounds pretty intense to me. Knowing what he was going through and knowing what was coming, Jesus laid it all out there, so to speak. And the Father listened, just like he'll listen to you. So pray. And then I think Jesus shows us here, keep on praying. Don't just pray the request once and then stop. Keep on praying for what you want. That's what Jesus did here. I mean, we don't have the content of everything that Jesus talked to the Father about, but we do have a summary. And we know that others who wrote about this, like Matthew, report that Jesus prayed that take this cup from me prayer at least twice. So when you're facing the hard stuff, don't try to go it alone. Pray and keep on praying. And then lean into that prayer that Jesus prayed for guidance on how to pray in times like that. Father, if you're willing, take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done. Father, if you're willing. Again, what Jesus is doing there is what he wants us to do. He's exploring the bounds of the Father's will and boldly asking the Father for what he wants. It's like he's saying, Father, I know this is what I came to do. And I want to do it. I love these people. I love all people. I love the world. I want to do what's necessary to make things right again, to restore the relationship with us that was lost after the beginning, and to bring hope and healing to your world again. But Father, this is hard. Is there perhaps another way, an easier road, something else that I could do, something less difficult, something that requires less sacrifice, that would accomplish the same thing? Do I have to drink the cup, or is there another way? Exploring the bounds of the Father's will, boldly asking for what you want and desire. I mean, that's a pretty good model for us to follow. I mean, probe the possibilities, explore the alternatives, ask God for what you want. Boldly and persistently, yet also like Jesus here, humbly, present your requests to the Father and probe the expanse of his mercy. I mean, how can you know what God will grant if you don't ask him? So ask him, explore the bounds of his will. And another thing I see Jesus doing here that I think he invites us to do is use the Lord's Prayer, and other Bible too, to guide you as you're praying. I mean, how does he start this prayer? Father. Same way he starts the Lord's Prayer. Our Father. And what he's doing here is he's saying, pray from the relationship and lead into the relationship. And trust the relationship. And what else does he pray? Thy will be done. Thy will be done. That's what Jesus taught us in the Lord's Prayer. Thy will be done, literally, your will, Lord, let it happen. And here he's practicing what he preaches. He's using the exact same words, the exact same order. Thy will be done. Your will, let it happen. And he's using that to pray to the Father in his hour of deepest anguish and greatest need. I mean, sometimes that's just what you have to do. Sometimes the situation and your emotions in the situation are so intense that it's just hard to give shape to the words to express the cries of your heart. And so at times like that, you can lean into words you already know. You can lean into words that God's already given you to say, and that He's given you to use in any and every situation. In fact, sometimes in my Lenten devotions this week made me think of something else that Jesus might have been leaning into. Not only this Lord's Prayer, not only this leaning into the words that God's already given you to know, like thy will be done, that we repeat over and over and over again. In my YouVersion devotions, I was reading Psalm 27. And as I was reading through that, it struck me how much that particular Psalm of David and his prayer there connected with what Jesus was going through and was going to be going through. And it made me think how it might have helped Jesus, as he's talking here to the Father, to also lean into not only the words he taught, but other Bible that he knew. And that as he would help him to lean into the Father's will and say thy will be done and mean it. And trust the Father's will, even if the Father's will would end up being no. Let's look at that and see what you think about that. Here's a few of the verses from that prayer. Psalm 27.
The Lord is my light and my salvation, so why should I be afraid? The Lord is my fortress, protecting me from danger, so why should I tremble? When evil people come to devour me, when my enemies and foes attack me, they will stumble and fall. Though a mighty army surrounds me, my heart will not be afraid. Even if I am attacked, I will remain confident. Hear me as I pray, O Lord. Be merciful and answer me. Do not turn your back on me. Do not reject your servant in anger. You have always been my helper. Don't leave me now. Don't abandon me, O God of my salvation. Even if my father and mother abandon me, the Lord will hold me close. Teach me how to live, O Lord. Lead me along the right path, for my enemies are waiting for me. Do not let me fall into their hands, for they accuse me of things I've never done. With every breath they threaten me with violence. Yet I am confident. I will see the Lord's goodness while I am here in the land of the living. Wait patiently for the Lord. Be brave and courageous. Yes, wait patiently for the Lord.
So if you've read some of the rest of the story of this particular week in the life of Jesus, can you see how this prayer of David relates to what Jesus would be going through? Enemies all around, people seeking to get him and destroy him, people attacking him on all sides and accusing him of things he'd never done. And can you see how Jesus in that situation would need the Father's help to be brave and courageous and to see things through? And how he might be leaning into this prayer of David in this time, this other Bible prayers that he knew. And can you see Jesus leaning into these bookend verses? The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? And verse 14, wait for the Lord. Be brave and courageous, yet wait patiently for the Lord. And can you see how trusting the Word as well as the relationship, how trusting the Word might help Jesus pray thy will be done and mean it? Actively exploring the will of the Father. Actively approaching the Father to see if there's another way than the cross to accomplish the same mission, our salvation, but also actively trusting thy will be done when the answer was different than what Jesus wanted. And the Father's answer was no to Jesus' request. See, the Father's answer to Jesus was not, okay, I'll remove the suffering. Or, okay, I'll lessen the suffering. The Father's answer was no. The original plan, it's still the best plan. In fact, it's the only plan. The only way to accomplish the mission. The only way to make things right. The only way to fix these broken relationships and bring these people that we love back home again. So, Jesus, you do need to drink the cup all the way down. Not just sipping it, you need to drink it all the way down. Drink it to the very bottom. Drink it to the very last drop. That is my will. And that's not easy. It's going to be hard. Really, really hard. But it is necessary. So here's my final answer. No, I will not take the cup away. But I will give you what you need to make it through the suffering. I will give you what you need to make it through the suffering. Luke records this line for us so that we know that. Verse 43, an angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. An angel appeared and strengthened him. That's God's answer to Jesus' prayer. And so, strengthened by God, Jesus endured the hurt and the pain and the emotional distress, not only of what was coming, but the agony of not having his prayer answered the way that he wanted it to be. And hearing God say no to what you want is never easy, is it? But Jesus is showing us here what we can do and what God will do for us so that we can make it through our own dark and difficult days of stress and strain and struggle and suffering. And what you do when you pray and pray and pray and still God says no. Because that's hard to hear. Pretty much always is. But if God's answer is no, then God's promises to you are the same promises that he made to Jesus. I will strengthen you so that you can make it through. And trust that as you're going through this struggle, that Father knows best. Isn't that what Jesus is showing us here? Father, you know what I want, yet not my will, but yours be done. And when the Father's final answer was no to Jesus' request, well, Jesus, he was okay with that final answer. Why? It certainly wasn't easy. Stress and strain and struggle and sacrifice is never it is. But ultimately, here's what Jesus does. Ultimately, Jesus trusts the relationship, and Jesus leans into that word, and he obeys. Jesus puts his own desire to have the cup taken away behind his desire to do the Father's will. For Jesus, doing the Father's will comes first. And so he resolutely marches toward a cross. And as Jesus does that, he helps us do the same things when life is hard for us. And we find the answer to our quest, at least for now, is also no. Jesus shows us here in the garden how to both trust and obey. And he teaches us to understand that the ultimate purpose of our prayer is not to change the will of the Father. The ultimate purpose of our prayer is to ask that the Father's will always be done and to ask that our will be conformed to the Father's, and then to humbly obey. To humbly obey whether his answer is yes, or whether it's I'll make things a little easier, or whether it's no, this is your road for now. Trusting, as Jesus did, that the Father, just like he did for Jesus, will strengthen you for the road ahead. Strengthen you with his word with his presence, with his supper, with his people, and with whatever else that you need.